I have shod horses, buried them, and wept over more than one, and in 50 years about the great stables of England I have learned this. A man may own a horse and command it and ride it into legend and still never once be trusted by it. Trust is a thing a horse gives, not a thing a man takes. I did not understand that the morning the Duke of Ravensworth made his wager. My sister understood it before she could walk. I was 17 and undergroom at Ravensworth Park, and my sister Rhoda was 2 years older and worth more than the whole mounted field, though not one of them knew it. We were the horsemaster's children. Our father had been head of the Duke's stables until a fall took him, and after that we were kept on out of a habit of charity and paid in leavings. Rhoda mucked stalls and carried water and was invisible, which is the surest disguise a clever woman ever wore. The Duke came down to the paddock that frost-bright November morning with half the county's gentlemen behind him, and a horse before him that no man had ever sat. "Saladin," said Lord Petheridge, who liked to name a danger so he might stand further from it, "the grey the Marquis sold you. They say he's killed 2 grooms." "They say a great deal," said the Duke. "I had better tell you about the Duke as he was then, before you decide too quickly what sort of man he was, because I decided too quickly myself and was wrong. Julian, Duke of Ravensworth, was perhaps 35, tall and hard through the shoulder, with the still, cold face of a man who had never in his life been told no by anything that breathed. They called him the Iron Seat, and it was said no horse living could unseat him. He rode as other men merely sat, as if the animal beneath him were an extension of his own will and had never had a will of its own. He was reputed the finest horseman in England, and he believed it, which is a different and more dangerous thing. Saladin stood 16 hands in iron gray, and his eye rolled white at the crowd, and there was a knot of scar tissue along his near shoulder where someone had used a whip who ought to have used sense. 50 guineas, said Petheridge, says he throws you inside a minute. 100, said another. The Duke drew off his gloves, finger by finger, in no hurry at all. "You'll make me a rich man, gentlemen," he said. "Any horse can be broken. It wants only a firmer will than his own. I have never met the horse with a firmer will than mine." I looked for Rhoda then, the way a man looks for the one steady thing in a rising wind, and found her at the paddock rail with a bucket in each hand, gone very still. She was watching the horse, not the Duke. She was reading it the way our father had taught us to read them. The pinned ears, the tail clamped hard to the quarters, the trembling that was not cold. And I saw her mouth press into a flat line, and I knew, the way you know weather, that this was going to go badly. It went badly. The Duke went up onto Saladin's back like a man mounting a chair, and for a moment the horse froze, astonished, as horses do at a thing they have not braced for. And then Saladin came apart. I have seen bad horses buck. I had not until that morning seen a horse try in genuine earnest to kill the thing on its back, the twisting leap, the wrench in the air, the wicked snap of the spine that is meant to break a man across the withers. The Duke rode it. God help me, he rode it magnificently, and every gentleman at the rail roared. And for perhaps 40 seconds it was the finest thing I ever saw a man do on a horse. Then Saladin stopped bucking, which is the trick the truly clever bad ones learn, and instead simply flung himself sideways into the paddock rail with all his weight, meaning to crush the Duke's leg between half a ton of horse and a fence post. The Duke came off. He had to. A man who did not come off there would have lost the leg. He came off hard, rolled, and was on his feet at once. I will give him that. He was never once afraid, and Saladin wheeled and came at him with his ears flat and his teeth bared, and there was death in it, real death, and the gentleman at the rail stopped roaring all at once. And my sister walked over the fence. She did not climb it. She put one hand on the top rail and was over it and between the Duke and the horse before I had got my breath, and she did not shout, and she did not run, and she did not raise a hand. She stood square in front of that gray murderer with her 2 empty hands loose at her sides, and she said, in a low, even voice with a scold buried down in the bottom of it, "That'll do, that will do now, none of that." And Saladin stopped. He stopped as though he'd hit a wall. His ears came up off his neck. He blew hard and his sides were heaving, and his eye was still wild, but he stopped, and he stood. And then, while 40 gentlemen of England watched with their mouths open, he dropped his great scarred head and pushed his nose against my sister's shoulder like a foal. "There," she said softly, and laid her hand flat on his neck on the whip scar, gently, gently. "There. I know, nobody's going to do that here." Nobody at the rail said one word. The frost smoked off the horses, and the Duke of Ravensworth stood in the churned mud of his own paddock and stared at my sister as though the ground had opened. "You," he said at last. His voice was not quite steady, and I do not think it was from the fall. "Who are you?" Rhoda kept her hand on the horse. She did not curtsy. That was the thing I saw the gentleman note, that she did not curtsy, could not, without taking her hand from the frightened animal, and that she chose the horse. "Rhoda Verrill, your grace," she said. "The horsemaster's daughter, I carry the water." "You carry the water," he repeated. "Yes, your grace. And this horse, that 2 grooms could not hold, that I could not sit. He's not a bad horse, your grace." She said it plainly, without heat, the way she'd have told you it was Tuesday. "He's a frightened one. Somebody taught him men mean the whip, so he gets his blow in first. It's not wickedness, it's arithmetic." She stroked the scar again. "You can't break arithmetic, you can only teach him a different sum." I watched that land on the Duke of Ravensworth like a slap, and I thought, God have mercy, she's done for us both now. And I began composing in my head the speech that would get us turned off without a character by nightfall. But the Duke did not turn us off. The Duke stood very still, and something moved behind that cold face, not anger, though I braced for anger. Something more like a man doing a sum himself and not liking the total. "Take the horse to his box," he said quietly. "Verrill the boy, you're her brother." "Yes, your grace," I managed. "Both of you attend me in the stable office. Now." He turned to the staring gentleman, and the cold came back down over him like a visor. "The wager stands, my lords. I said the horse could be handled. He has been." A thin smile. "I merely neglected to specify by whom." They laughed, because you laughed when the Duke made a joke, but it was uneasy laughter, and they went up to the house for their brandy, talking low among themselves. And I knew the story would be all over 3 counties by supper. How the iron seat was thrown, and a stable girl walked out and stopped the killer Gray with a word. I thought that was the humiliation, and that we would pay for it. I did not yet understand the Duke of Ravensworth at all. The stable office was my father's old room, and it still had his tack pegs and his liniment smell, and it wrung my heart to stand in it. The Duke came in still mudded from his fall and stood with his back to the little window, and Rhoda stood with her chin up and her red hands folded, and I stood behind her wishing I were a smaller target. "How long," said the Duke, "have you been gentling my horses?" Rhoda was quiet a moment. "Which do you mean, your grace?" "I mean," he said, and there was a dangerous evenness to it, "that in the 4 years since your father died I have bought a great many difficult horses at a great discount because they were called unmanageable, and every one of them has come sound and quiet to my hand within the month, and my head groom Cobble has taken the credit and the crown pieces, and I have thought myself a shrewd judge of a bargain." He paused. "The Vindrel Bay that savaged a groom at Newmarket, the black mare that would not be shod. The chestnut Petheridge sold me swearing was a bolter, every one." He looked at her. "That was not Cobble." "No, your grace," Rhoda said. "That was you." "Yes, your grace." The silence in that little room was a live thing. I could hear Saladin blowing in his box down the row, quiet now, quiet as a lamb. "Cobble told me," the Duke said slowly, "that he had a system, a firm hand, a method he'd not share, being his living. I paid him a guinea a head for horses." He turned quiet. His jaw tightened. "I have been handing crown pieces to a man for standing in a doorway watching a girl do his work." "Cobble never hurt them, your grace," Rhoda said, and I stared at her because Cobble was a brute and we both knew it, and here she was defending the man who'd stolen 4 years of her wages. not where you'd see. And he let me be mostly so long as I gave him the credit. It was a fair enough bargain. I got the horses. That was the wage I wanted. That was the wage you wanted, the Duke repeated, and I saw it strike him, truly strike him, that a person could want, as a wage, only the chance to do the thing well. It was not a language he spoke. He had been paid in the coin of admiration all his life, and here was a creature who did not want it, who had given away 4 years of glory to a brute in a doorway rather than lose the horses. "Why," he said, and it came out rougher than his other words, "did you not come to me?" Rhoda looked at him then, really looked, and I saw her decide to tell the truth, which with my sister was always a kind of danger. "Because you'd have done what you did this morning, your grace," she said. "You'd have got up on him to prove you could. Men who ride like you do, forgive me, you don't want a horse. You want to win one, and you can't win Saladin. There's nothing in him left to beat, somebody already beat it all out. You can only give him something better than fear and wait for him to believe you. And waiting, the smallest breath, almost a smile, is not a thing the iron seat is known for." I shut my eyes. I thought, now we are finished. The Duke of Ravensworth was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in a strange, arrested voice, "You have watched me ride." "Everyone's watched you ride, your grace. You're the finest horseman in England." "You don't think so?" "I think," said Rhoda carefully, "you are the finest rider in England. It is not the same thing." And when he only looked at her, she went on, gently, because she was never cruel, my sister, only true. "A rider makes a horse do. A horseman makes a horse want to. You've never had to learn the second, your grace, because you've always been strong enough for the first. That's not a fault. It's only a thing you've missed. Now I want you to understand what a thing it was, what she had done. She had told the Duke of Ravensworth, in his own stable, mudded from his own fall, that the one thing he was famous for the whole length of England was the lesser half of the art. And she had done it without a grain of malice, the way you'd tell a man he had mud on his coat. And the Duke, and this is the moment I go back to, all these years on, when I want to remember what he truly was under the iron, the Duke did not have us thrown out. He did not go cold. He stood there and he took it, and something in his hard face cracked open, and what came through the crack was not anger. It was hunger. The plain hunger of a proud man who has just discovered there is a country he has never traveled, and that the door to it is being held open by a girl who carries the water. "Teach me," he said. I dropped a bridle. It clattered on the stones, and neither of them so much as looked. "Your Grace," Rhoda said. "The second thing," his voice was low and quick now, "to make a horse want to, Saladin, teach me. I'll not touch him without you. I'll do as you say and only as you say." A muscle worked in his jaw, the words were clearly costing him coin he'd never spent. "I'll be your pupil in my own stable, whatever wage you name." Rhoda looked at him a long moment, and I saw her weigh it, and I will swear to this, I saw her decide he meant it. "There's no wage, your grace," she said. "You can't buy this one, that's rather the whole of the lesson." And then, because she could never resist a fair fight, "But I'll teach you, on one condition." "Name it." "You do exactly as I say, and you don't get on him, not once, not to prove anything until I say he's ready, not if it takes till spring." Her chin came up. "The first time you climb up on that horse to show me you can, we're done. I'll not watch you frighten him back to where he started." The Duke of Ravensworth, who had never in his life taken an order from a soul, looked at my sister the water carrier for a long, long moment. "Agreed," he said. And that was how the strangest winter of my life began. I wish I could tell you all of it, the mornings in the frost-white paddock, the two of them and the gray horse and me holding the long rope. But I will tell you the shape of it, because the shape is the thing. The first week, Rhoda would not let the Duke near Saladin at all. He was made to stand at the rail, this proud man, and simply watch her do nothing. That was the hardest lesson, and she gave it to him first on purpose. She would go into the paddock with the horse and stand, and do nothing, hour on hour, until Saladin's curiosity outgrew his fear and he came to her. "You cannot make him come," she told the Duke over the rail, not turning round. You can only be so quiet and so unfrightening that coming becomes his idea. Standing still is the whole art. It's the hardest riding there is, your grace, and there's no horse under you at all. I watched the Duke of Ravensworth learn to stand still. It was like watching a river learn to be a stone. He was terrible at it. He fidgeted. He wanted to act, to do, to conquer the morning. And every time his impatience leaked out of him, the horse felt it and shied, and Rhoda would say, without heat, he felt that. Whatever you were thinking just then, he felt it. Think something else. And the Duke, to his everlasting credit, would set his jaw and try to think something else. And slowly, over days, he learned to empty himself of wanting and stand. And I began to notice, along about the second week, that it was not only the horse he watched. He watched my sister, not the way the gentleman watched a pretty maid. Rhoda was not pretty exactly. She was weathered and plain-spoken, and her hands were ruined with work. But the way a man watches a thing he cannot account for and cannot stop thinking about. He watched the sure economy of her hands. He watched her be right, over and over, about a creature he'd have sworn he understood better than any man alive. I think it unmade him a little every day to be so gently and so completely outclassed by a girl who carried the water. And I did not understand this then, being 17. I think being unmade was, for a man made all of iron, a kind of relief he had never known he wanted. And Rhoda, my sister, who had never in her life been listened to by anyone above the rank of horse. There was the Duke of Ravensworth attending to her every word as though it were scripture, doing exactly as she bid, laying down his enormous pride each morning at the paddock gate like a man taking off his boots. I saw what it did to her, though she'd have died before she said it. I saw her start to take a little more care with her hair. I saw her one morning laugh at something he said. The Duke had made a joke, a real one, dry and quick, and my sister laughed out loud in the frost, and the Duke looked as astonished and as pleased as if he'd broken Saladin himself. They fought, mind you. Lord, how they fought. Not the horse, never the horse, they were of one mind there, but everything else. He was arrogant still. 4 years of a thing don't wash out in 4 weeks. He'd try to hurry her, try to buy his way through with some grand gesture, and she'd stop him flat. You cannot give him a better stall to make him trust you, she told him once, exasperated, when he'd ordered Saladin moved to the finest box in the range. Trust isn't a thing you purchase. You're trying to win him again with kindness now instead of strength, but it's the same wanting to win. He'll feel it. Stop trying to be good to him and just be quiet near him. There's a difference, and until you feel it in your own chest you'll not manage this horse, or—" She stopped. "Or," said the Duke. "Or anything else that has a mind of its own," Rhoda finished, and turned very red and went to fetch the rope. The Duke looked after her, and I saw the smile start at the corner of his hard mouth, and I thought, oh no. Oh, this is going somewhere no good can come of. For a duke does not marry the girl who carries the water, and my sister is not a fool, and this will end with her heart broken and us turned off after all. The county talked, of course. Petheridge and the rest had not forgotten the wager, and now here was the iron seat spending his whole winter in his stable-yard taking instruction from a stable girl. And the story grew in the telling until, I heard, there were those who said the Duke had run mad, and those who said worse, uglier things about my sister. The kind of things men say about a woman who has risen an inch above where they filed her. It came to a head at the Ravensworth hunt breakfast in December, when Lord Petheridge, full of the Duke's own claret, said the ugly thing out loud in the Duke's own hall, with the word he chose for my sister hanging in the air. I was not there. I had it from the footman who had it from the door, but I know what the Duke did because the whole county knew it by the next day. The Duke of Ravensworth set down his glass, and in the silence he said, quite pleasantly, "Petheridge, that woman has more art in her water-reddened hands than you have in your whole body and estate, and she has never once used it to injure a living creature, which is more than either of us can say. You will apologize for the word, or you will give my friend your direction and name your second, for I find I would rather shoot you than hear it again." He called her his friend. In his own hall before the county, the iron seat named the water carrier his friend and offered to stand up and be shot for her. Petheridge apologized. Men like Petheridge always apologize when the alternative is real. And the ugly talk did not stop, talk never does, but it went underground, where it belonged, and no man said the word again where the Duke might hear. When Rhoda learned of it, I told her. I couldn't help it. She went white and then she went still and she said, "He shouldn't have. It'll do him harm, tangling his name with mine. He shouldn't have." But her hand, when she said it, had crept up to press flat against her own breastbone, over her heart, exactly the gesture she used on a frightened horse to say, I know, and I understood that whatever was happening to the Duke of Ravensworth, that winter was happening to my sister too, and that neither of them, for all their skill at reading the wordless want in a dumb creature, seemed able to read it in themselves. Saladin came right at the turn of the year. I was there. I would not have missed it for the crown of England. It was a still gray morning, the 1st of January, hard frost on the paddock rail, and Rhoda had judged the day right the way she judged everything. The horse was ready, she said, and the man was ready, which was the harder judgment. She had the Duke stand at Saladin's shoulder, the scarred shoulder, for a long while, just breathing, just being quiet and unwanting near the horse the way she'd spent 2 months teaching him to be. And Saladin, the killer gray, the horse that had tried in genuine earnest to crush the Duke against a fence, turned his great head and lipped at the Duke's sleeve, and then, unbidden, dropped his nose against the Duke's chest and stood there, trusting, breathing, at peace. I saw the Duke of Ravensworth put his hand up and lay it on the gray neck, on the scar, exactly as Rhoda had that first morning, gentle as gentle, and I saw his hard face do something I never thought to see it do. His eyes were wet. The iron seat stood in his frost-white paddock with his hand on a horse that trusted him, a thing he had never in all his triumphant life earned before, only taken, and he wept silently, without shame. "There," said Rhoda softly from the rail. Her own voice was not steady. "There now, you feel that, that's the whole of it, that's the country you never traveled. He wants to, nobody made him, he just wants to." "Yes," said the Duke. He did not take his hand from the horse. He did not look at her. He said to the horse or to the frost or to himself, "I feel it." And then at last he did look at her, across the paddock, over the gray horse's peaceful head, and he said, "Rhoda, get up on him. Your Grace. You've never once ridden him. All this winter you gave him to me. You stood at the rail and gave me the thing you'd made and took the credit for none of it, same as always." His voice was rough. "I'll not have it. Not again. Get up on your horse." And my sister, after a moment, went to Saladin and murmured to him, and gathered a fistful of gray mane, and swung up onto his bare back light as a leaf. And the great scarred killer that no man in England had ridden stood quiet as milk beneath her. And then, at the barest shift of her weight, moved off around the paddock in a soft, floating, collected trot, ears forward, entirely and only hers. The Duke watched them go round, and I stood beside him, forgotten, 17 and holding a rope, and I heard the finest horseman in England say under his breath, in a tone of purest wonder and something very near to grief, "I have spent my whole life being the best rider anyone had ever seen, and I never once, until this winter, saw what riding was for." He turned to me. I think he'd forgotten I was there and was surprised to find a witness, but he did not send me off. He said, quite low, "Tom, your sister, is there, has she, the iron seat, who had never in his life fumbled for a word, fumbled? Is there a man, someone she?" "No, your Grace," I said. "There's only the horses, there's only ever been the horses." He nodded slowly, watching her come round again on the gray, and I saw him arrive at the edge of a thing, and stop, the way even a bold man stops at the top of a great height. "She'll refuse me," he said, half to himself. "She thinks I want to win her, same as the horse," a breath of a laugh with no ease in it. "And she's told me, hasn't she, a dozen times, that the wanting to win is the very thing that spoils it. She'll think I'm collecting her. The unmanageable one gentled at last, another difficult creature come quiet to the Duke's hand. He shook his head. How does a man such as I have been, how does he ask so that it's not that? And I, being 17 and no wiser than a fence post, gave him the only true answer I had, which happened to be my sister's own lesson handed back. I don't think you ask, your grace, I said. I think you stand still, and you're so quiet and so unwanting that coming to you becomes her idea. The Duke of Ravensworth looked at me, and then, slowly, the hard mouth curved, and it was the first truly warm smile I ever saw on his face, and he said, God help me. She's even taught me how to court her, and she doesn't know it. He did not propose to my sister that day, nor for a fortnight after. And I understood, watching, exactly what he was doing, and it was the bravest thing I ever saw a proud man do. He was standing still. He did not shower her with gifts. He'd learned that lesson in the horse. He did not press or command or dazzle. He simply stayed near. He came down to the stables not to be taught now, but only to be there, quiet, unwanting, mucking a stall alongside her with his own ducal hands, to her open scandal. Your grace, you cannot, someone will see, let them, was all he said, and forked the straw. He learned the names of every horse from her. He listened. He stood so quiet and so unfrightening, day on day, that I watched my fierce, wary, guarded sister, who had given away 4 years of glory rather than risk wanting something she couldn't have. I watched her begin, without quite knowing she did it, to come to him. Until one gray afternoon in the tack room, with the liniment smell of our father all round them and the rain going soft on the roof, I heard. I was not meant to. I was in the next stall and froze. I heard my sister say, in a low, frightened, wondering voice quite unlike her, Why do you keep coming down here, your grace? You've no more to learn. Saladin's maid. Why do you keep standing about the stables near me, saying nothing? And the Duke of Ravensworth said, very quietly, Because you taught me that if a man wants a wild thing to come to him, he must not chase it. He must only be so quiet and so plainly safe and so patient that coming to him becomes her own idea. A long pause with the rain in it. I've been standing still, Rhoda, for a fortnight. I have been trying, with all the little art you've taught me, to be a man you might one day of your own will want to come to. Because I'll not net you like a bird, nor break you like a horse, nor win you like a wager. I have done enough winning for one life and found it empty as a drum. I should like, if you would ever have it so, and only if it were your own idea, freely and never else, I should like you to come to me. And stay. Not as anything you carry or muck or gentle. As my wife and the Duchess of Ravensworth, and the only person alive who ever taught me the difference between being obeyed and being trusted. There was a silence, then so long I thought my heart would stop. And then my sister, my plain, fierce, water-carrying sister, who had never been given anything in her life she had not earned twice over, said, in a voice that shook, That's not, your grace, that's not a thing you can mean. Dukes don't, the county would, you'd be ruined. Tangling your name. I've consulted the county's opinion my whole life, said the Duke, and it has made me the loneliest man in 3 shires. I find I no longer want it, I want yours. And then softer, you're doing it now, you know, what you scold me for. You're arguing why I can't want the thing so that if I go it won't have been a no, only good sense. It's what you did with the horse's credit for 4 years, gave the thing away first so no one could take it from you. I heard him move 1 step, no more. I'm not going anywhere, Rhoda. I'm standing still. Take all the time you like. But I'll tell you plainly what I want so there's no mistaking it for a whim or a collection or a wager. I love you. I have loved you since the morning you walked over my fence and chose the frightened horse over the safe curtsy. Come to me. Or don't. But know that I'm here and I'm quiet and I'm not afraid of you and I never will be. And I heard my sister begin, very quietly, to cry, Rhoda, who never wept, and then I heard nothing at all for a long moment, and then I heard her say, muffled, against what I am fairly sure was the Duke of Ravensworth's chest, You dreadful, arrogant, impossible man. It took you 4 years to notice I existed. It took me 4 years, said the Duke, and I could hear the smile and the wet in his voice both together, to become a man worth existing for. You were teaching me the whole time. I was only slow. They were married in the spring in the little gray church at Ravensworth, and the county came because when a duke marries you come, whatever you have said in your cups. Petheridge came and wished them joy and meant about half of it, which for Petheridge was a triumph of the spirit. My sister wore her mother's gown made over, and would not have jewels, and walked up the aisle with her ruined, clever hands quite steady, and the Duke of Ravensworth watched her come to him with a look on his hard face that shamed every man there who had ever thought her beneath him. She rode Saladin to the church. Of course she did. The great gray killer that no man in England could sit, gentle as a summer evening, ribbons in his mane, carrying the new Duchess of Ravensworth up the frost-thawed lane with his ears forward and his scarred shoulder proud, because she had asked him to, and he wanted to, and that she'd told the Duke, and the Duke had learned, and I have never in the 50 years since forgotten it. That is the whole of the art, and the whole of love besides. Not the breaking and not the winning, but the long, patient, quiet standing still, until the wild and wary thing you'd never dream of forcing turns of its own free heart, and comes to you and stays. The Duke gave up being called the Iron Seat. He said he had a better title now. When the grand gentleman asked him, that first married summer, whether it was true, the shocking thing they'd heard, that the Duke of Ravensworth had learned his horsemanship from his own Duchess, he would smile, the warm smile, the one she'd taught his hard face how to make, and he would say, "Every scrap of it. She is the finest horseman in England. I am only the finest rider. She was good enough to marry the lesser man and spend her life teaching him the difference." And my sister, the water carrier, the Duchess of Ravensworth, would put her reddened hand flat on his chest, over his heart, the way she did with a creature she had gentled and trusted and would never once betray, and she would say, "There now, that'll do." And the proud man would go quiet and glad beneath her hand, exactly like the horse, and I, who carried the rope and saw it all, and never once in 50 years saw anything to match it, I would go back to the stables smiling and leave them to their peace.